Jesus incarnation.
It forces the mind to be creative. Are just on a different path.
We completely disregard everything they've ever said or done as a result of that.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Oz Table Talk. My name is Luke. I'm at the table with Dave, Ben, and Dr. Dan is back with us.
Hello.
For the next installment in this series, which has been going well, I think. I'm keen. We're going to be talking about Elijah tonight.
Yeah, it's great.
Today.
Every day we come refreshed and change our
in
clothing.
exactly the same clothes.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think anyone's going to be, or any observant people out there are probably going to notice the fact we're all dressed exactly the same as we were for the last 4 episodes. So,
we just wanted to keep consistently. Consistency is important.
yes, that's
it
right.
It brings a homely.
That's
thing.
right. Well, these are, I've actually just got 7 sets of this outfit, and so I just wear it every day. It worked for Steve Jobs. It works for the. I can do it too, right?
Excellent.
You are the last person that I would expect to wear the same shirt every day.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah.
Okay.
He would not have that.
Well, I would love to hear more of this. Keep on going.
I have considered it.
Have you?
Yes,
Really?
Yes.
What?
I'm trying to remember who
That's
it
why
was.
it's called a uniform.
Yeah,
that's called a uniform.
Well, I was.
You were homeschooled. You don't like uniforms.
I actually had a school uniform.
From homeschooling?
Sure did.
What? How does that make any sense?
The one privilege.
Well, it actually came about for a funny reason because when I was young, homeschooling wasn't as popular as it is now.
Correct.
And so if people would see me if I was in town with mum,
legal reasons.
Yeah,
legal reasons.
Legal reasons. Well, they would see me and they would say to mum, "Well, why isn't he in school? He doesn't look sick." We literally had people say that to us on the street.
Yeah, wow.
And so she said, "Well, we'll fix this problem." So
she got your uniform.
That's right. So she let me design it, and I designed a logo for the school, and she even gave me a book of Latin and got me to figure out
the Ferrugia school.
Yeah. Well, I lived at a place called Balmoral, and so it was Balmoral Christian College. That's what was on the. It had a population of 1, which was that was it. Anyway, but this isn't about me. Why are we here?
I don't know, but it's pretty cool to know.
Yeah.
So, and yes, I was reading about decision fatigue and how a lot of creative people that are highly effective, they limit the amount of decisions they make. They have meal plans, right? They automate their lives. And one of the things was that they choose a good quality set of clothes and they basically just buy multiples of it, and then they don't have to think. It's just put it on that.
You are full of surprises, aren't you?
Stephen Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, hashtag them in this episode. They might listen to it.
That's right.
We're always wearing the same
I
thing.
don't think Steve
Jobs
is going to
gone.
watch it.
Right. True. The family might want to the Apple family.
Yeah.
The Apple family.
But they wear the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so this is our final episode today in this marathon.
Okay, man.
So I wanted to ask you a question, Dan. We're coming up to the end of 2021.
Right.
What is one of your New Year's resolutions for 2022?
I have none.
You have none?
You don't believe in resolutions of any kind?
I do, to take advantage of the fat and the rush of chemicals for my patients. And I have used it in the past to take advantage of it at the time. I believe resolutions have to happen today.
Right.
That's the reason. It sounds like cliche perhaps, but I truly believe it.
So what is a resolution
it.
for today?
Finish this episode. Go home. I have a rest. I don't know.
The future belongs to those who control the culture, and the culture belongs to those who control the conversation. So we are having the conversations you wish you could have at church to build a safe and vibrant community.
About what's coming?
This
my
is the
family
Oz
is
Table
not
Talk
here right now, so I'm
podcast.
looking forward to meeting them again. I'm gonna take some time away. Disclosing a bit of personal information. That's okay. So my wife and I became 18th years married last week.
Congratulations.
And so to celebrate our 18th, I usually try to take time away with her.
That's nice.
It happened last week, but I had to work, so this week it will take place with a bit of mix of professional development as well there. But I'll do that first, and then I'll do the other part. But I don't have resolutions as such. But I do have this idea of a long... So this is going to sidetrack a little bit, but
do it.
People, a benefit, this is a therapeutic intervention on its own in terms of hope building, of goal setting, medium, short, medium, and long term. And everybody should have such goals. If we don't, we lose track of purpose and sense.
Yeah.
So, and it's interesting because all you really have to do is change your short-term resolutions or goals. We could call it goals. because the long one, as time goes by, becomes a medium. The medium becomes a short. Actually, no, you have to add the long one. Sorry, that's the logic, isn't it? So the medium becomes a short, the long becomes a medium, and all you have to do is keep on adding one form.
Yes.
And when I talk about long, I'm thinking 8 to 12 months. Between 9 to 8 to 12 months. I know some people say like, oh no, but we don't have the time button. I know that. But hey, if I do live 8 to 12 months from today, I want to be doing something.
Yeah.
that I look forward to.
All right. So what are your long-term goals then?
Well, between now, I'm hoping to be able to go and see my family overseas between now and 12 months.
Okay.
Yeah, so I do have that. That's a goal.
Has it been a long time?
Well, I had the blessing to see them before COVID hit, 2019, 2020, and then 2020 came. So I saw them at that borderline.
Mm-hmm.
But it hasn't been as long, so I wouldn't say that. A few years, I suppose. But I'll tell you, they're more fun, in my opinion, practical goals. Those are more sentimental goals, and that they're okay to have. We mentioned that I like running before, right? So I sign up for races ahead in advance.
Okay.
So today, I already paid for a race that I'm going to be running in December next year.
Okay.
And I am signing up for one in August and one for July and considering one for May. So, yeah.
Okay. What's the one in December?
It's called GC50, Gold Coast, 50 kilometers along the coast. I think I will... Well, I don't think. I signed up for the 25 because my daughter is now running and I'd like to be with her. So,
that's exciting.
It has been lots of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's...
Does she beat you?
She could if she wanted to, but at the moment she hasn't put the effort yet to be able to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Hold on to that lead.
Is that a goal for her? Beat Dad?
I don't know. We might have to ask her. I don't think so.
Okay.
I find it enjoyable. I think the last one we did have 2 weeks ago. I think it was it? The same one actually.
Okay.
It was fun. It was lots of fun. I think I embarrassed her a lot. I mean, you have almost 17. She's 17 in a few weeks. Almost 17-year-old there running with her father and me. I don't know, singing, jumping. Was we're there, kilometer, 20, and she's like, Dad. She didn't say. She actually laughed and she said, it was fun. So I'm glad that I've been able to do that. So
yeah, that's really nice.
What about you?
You warned us about this.
Do you like
I stopped
resolutions, or you
thinking
haven't?
about this. No, I don't usually do resolutions either, but I just thought it'd be interesting.
So what's your long-term plan then?
But is it because of the same reason? Because you can do decisions now, or
Yeah, and also I feel like they can obviously be quite futile. New Year's resolutions, right? I like you have resolutions in the form of goals, right? I'm a very goal-driven person, so yeah, it's not unusual for me to have short, medium, long-term goals. So which one do you want to know, short, medium, or long-term?
Let's go with...
And for me, my definition of long-term is different than yours. My definition of long-term would be like 5-10 years.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Then let's go for medium.
Medium. Okay, so medium-term goal for me will be graduating from university.
Okay.
And finding a job that is more suitable for my ideology, I guess you would say.
Okay.
Because I'm currently working as an intern engineer, which is great. It's building my skill set, but I don't work for a company that specializes in humanitarian engineering, which is what I want to do.
Okay, gotcha.
So yeah, I'd like to find something more along those lines. On the medium term.
You might have to move overseas.
I'm open.
That's very cool.
You know, I told you I want to go to Canada.
Yes, because there's a lot of development
because
work
there is a
going
lot of Hey, there is places isolated right far out
Yeah,
north that nobody wants to go to.
That's right. No,
in the diamond mine.
I'm not settled. I'm up for whatever God sends me to.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
That's nice. You guys have goals, resolutions. Can I say something in the middle because you might have resolutions, but I did say that, but. I do think that even though it's the logic, right? If I have a New Year's resolution right now, why don't I do it now?
Yes.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
Right? Why do I have to wait until today? Is the whatever it is? I don't know when this is gonna come out.
It'll probably come out in the new year, but it's the 12th
why
of December.
Why do I have to wait to the 31st of December at 6:30 or 12 p.m. if you're into the whole thing, whatever that is, to make a decision?
Yeah.
The likelihood of you actually sustaining the decision is poor because you are not driven, willing, or confident that you can do it right now.
Uh-huh.
But if you come to that 31st and you're like, you know what, that's it. I'm gonna change this. Take advantage of that and do it. That's what I was trying to say. So they actually can play a role into people's life. I've seen it. So it can be beneficial.
Yep.
When you get there. Yeah. What about you guys?
What about you, Ben?
Ooh, probably short term. I'm say for the next 6 months, I've got 2 holidays to organise.
Oh,
so
nice.
one for my first year anniversary
Nice.
and a family get together. We're in the first week of July, which I actually mentioned I'm going to Fraser Island. We might even do a little bit of a theme because we were thinking about theming the so on the campground the Christmas in July.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Tiff wants to see us all in ugly sweaters.
Sounds
so
very Tiff. Yep.
Yeah.
and you can't do ugly sweaters here in Australia because it's just too hot.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. True.
It's still too hot in July.
I know.
Cooler. I'll go by with a sweater.
As long as it's a
I'm
fairly
Mexican, right?
as long as it's fairly thin, it shouldn't be too bad.
That should be okay. Yeah.
But it all depends on where they come from because, of course, you won't get them here in Australia. So we'll have to get them from overseas.
Yeah.
On sale.
And apart from that is just organising my advertising for my next stage of business expansion for the next year.
Oh, nice. So like a growth there.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I'm hoping in the next 3 years to reach full capacity.
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Cool. That's awesome.
Well, for me, I
It has to do with your business, or
well, I was about to say for me,
Yeah.
I'm somewhat in the same boat as I don't like putting it off for New Year's resolutions and,
Yeah,
and
okay.
that. But I do have long-term goals that I work towards, but I think about it more as a collection of habits that achieve those goals rather than just being an arbitrary goal at the end of the runway. So for me, I add positive change to my life by including new habits. And
any new habits you want to drive for?
yeah, well, I have already started, but like I guess it could be said that it's going into the new year, but trying to be more intentional about my health in the upcoming year, simply because in the last year I went through a phase where I started running more, I started getting more fit, and just some life circumstances changed, which meant that I couldn't do that for a while.
Sure.
And I was feeling so good
At that time,
point, and so I really want to get back to that. And so just installing some habits where I'm improving my health is one thing, and
Sign up for the GC50 with Dan.
Hey, some people
jumping and singing at
came
the 20
this year.
yeah.
The Cherry Boys.
Oh
came.
yeah, I saw the cherries. Yeah.
Hi guys, you better watch this episode.
Yeah, that would be tempting. But I think the longest run I've ever done so far is like 5K. So committing to a 50 feels like a bit of a jump.
Hey, maybe go for a 10. There's the Cane to Coral actually in town.
true.
So
Yeah. Came to come.
This went from personal health to competition very quickly for Luke.
I think with marathons, it's more about seeing if you can do it, isn't it?
Well, it depends on people. I mean, I'm
Depends who
not
you are.
into for winning it because there's no way I will. I don't do that for a living, and even if I wanted to, I have so many injuries. So for me, it's, I don't know. I just find it fun.
Yeah.
To be there it makes no sense. That's probably
no sense.
we have talked in previous episodes about cognitive dissonance, and that's probably one of the cognitively dissonant things that I do in my health. For those
Even in spite of injuries and etc.
well, not only that, long distance running at some point in time ceases to be healthy.
Yeah.
So I think there's some papers show 15, 20 Ks max. After that, your body goes on stress. Especially if you push yourself. So I don't run that fast, so I don't get that much stress. But when I started, it was quite hard, and I could see how my body was overdriven. So anyhow.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Okay, well, cool. So habits.
Yeah, and the other one that I was going to say is I have had in the back of my mind for probably close to a year now to start another YouTube channel.
Oh, right.
And I've got like a
Coaching people for ministry.
no, actually, something different again. So I have a tendency to overcommit and put too many things on my plate, and so that's why I haven't started that yet. I'm sort of waiting for a little bit more space in my schedule, but I'm not sure when that's going to happen yet. But as soon as that does happen, then I'll be adding that into my list of habits to work on a daily basis.
Okay, cool. Cool.
So, anyway.
Well, I have a question for you guys.
Sure.
Have you ever? I'm thinking over. Sorry about that.
No.
But have you
This is
ever?
fun.
Did you had a resolution? Have you ever thought of having as your New Year's resolution or a today resolution to become a prophet?
Nope.
Why are you running away from Jonah? No. I think
can't say
nobody
that I
has,
have.
but it's. But if that was a serious question, and we will, I think we most of us, I think all of us, potentially you didn't, you laugh it off, but I would say no as well.
Mm.
And the question is why?
Because I don't know about you, but I view being a prophet not as something that can be achieved, but something that is bestowed.
Okay.
So I don't feel like it's possible for me to make that decision, and because I can't affect the outcome, I wouldn't make it a resolution.
Oh, here's a challenge now. Have you ever heard of the School of the Prophets?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Will you sign up?
Yeah.
Because you sign up and then go like, okay, out of these guys, Luke is the guy I'm gonna grant. But you have to be in the hat.
Yeah.
You have to be in the school. Will you
That's a
sign
fair
up?
call, you know.
Will you sign up for the School of the Prophets?
Well, if there was such a thing that I didn't think was like a charlatan money-making scheme, yeah, I probably would.
Okay. No, the truth, the real deal, you know.
Yeah, if it was the real deal, I think that, why wouldn't you?
I don't know. When I look at the
fear.
life of the guy, well, when I look at the life of Elijah, which we will talk about today,
Yeah.
I think I'm like, even if you see the other prophets, we haven't talked about. There's so many prophets we can talk about.
Yeah.
Hosea, Daniel, Jeremiah, Isaiah. You know, okay, Moses.
You know what happened to him, right?
Yeah, I know. But at the
It's not
end,
so bad. Getting cut in half.
at the end. But through the life, it was. I don't.
Yeah.
He probably had a.
Oh, I mean, if you
troublesome time.
compare him to Jeremiah, I see
the
your
way
point.
he wrote it.
What do you mean? Jeremiah had a fun time.
It was the mindset, right? And that tells you about the personalities. Because I can almost be sure that Isaiah probably suffered. He just didn't say much about it.
Right. Okay,
While
that's a fair point.
The Jeremiah, the wailing prophet, he was wailing about it. Different attitude, right?
It's the only way that anyone would listen to him.
Yeah. Just like, oh. But you look at them and it doesn't look like something to sign up for, man. Like,
Yeah.
that's the reason why I'm thinking, like, why would you sign up?
Yeah.
But, so Elijah.
Yes, Elijah.
What do we know about Elijah, I guess?
We don't really, correct me if I'm wrong, but we really don't know anything about his early life, right? Like there is zero mention of
Not
that
in the
whatsoever.
scripture, no.
He is the prophet of God, like bang, that's how he enters the story.
Yep.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's already a crisis going on, and there's just a case of
Yeah. Enter Elijah.
enter Elijah. He's the guy who's going to fix the problem with God's backing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think because we don't know, and you are all right, we don't know about his background as such. I would like maybe for us to think about the most common peculiar story that people think of when they think about Elijah, which is that difficult time he had that brought him to a place where his mental state was deteriorated. And so the story is well known. He had a showdown with prophets of Baal, and you could argue he won if you could make it a competition. But God showed up for him because he was the prophet of the true high God, the only God that exists. But things happened there that caused him affliction.
Yes.
So what are the things that happened?
Jezebel.
All right, Jezebel is one.
Yeah.
Yeah. What
So,
did Jezebel?
well, basically, once the prophets of Baal were Jezebel's, they were in her corner, right? And so when he put them all to death, which, by the way, would have been a pretty traumatic experience right there, but she then threatens to kill him, and some switch flicks in his mind, and he loses confidence at that point, and so he runs.
Correct.
Yeah.
That is the first thing that I can think of. First is the stress of having to come to fulfill God's role. And at some point in time, I might have made the mention through this series about the idea that sometimes the distress comes by choice, sometimes by duty. This is duty, full on. There's a lot of things that tells you a little bit about his character. We were talking behind the scenes about temperaments. I mean, you have a guy who is making fun of the prophets of Baal, like very cynic. It's taunting them. It's just, And I'm thinking, we started this series with David, and I'm thinking about a lot of the chapters, a lot of the episodes, a lot of the Psalms, the journal of David, him speaking about his persecutors, his enemies, as being wicked, and God saying, hey, avenge them, gonna kill them and get rid of them, And I struggled for a long time. I still haven't reconciled fully with this, because I'm thinking, shouldn't he have the love of God and go help him to repent, make him, give him salvation and all that kind of stuff? He's like, no, get rid of it. Anyhow, and now we have Elijah, and a similar rhetoric in my mind, the dialogue in my mind is thinking like, you should be feeling sorry for these guys. Like the prophet of Baal is like self-harming. That's funny. Self-harm comes from paganistic stuff. Hey, anybody who is doing that, I know it's suffering. I'm not saying you're a pagan, but originally it comes from this idea of, hey, we're gonna appease the gods, Baal in this case, and so he's making fun of them. I'm thinking like, shouldn't he have a bit more? And that tells about his temperament. The idea that, I know nothing will happen. Choleric, perhaps. Angry.
Do you think that was
maybe not? I don't know.
Do you think that was his position though, or do you think he was putting that on?
I don't know. Maybe he was making a show for the sake of the people.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But wouldn't that be worse?
Oh, I'm not saying it's better. I'm just saying I'm questioning the narrative myself, thinking like the dramatic change in his confidence maybe belies the fact that he wasn't as confident as he was showing at Carmel.
Anytime that the people of God do something for God, we saw that in Samson. The Bible says that the spirit of the Lord came upon Samson, and then he did mighty things. Even though he was in his anger, his outrage, he still was judging the people of the Philistines and whatever. So I think that he still God has brought him with this potential confidence. I don't know if he was lacking confidence. I think what we see after, which we will get into, is the result of what he went through. So he's there, he's making fun of these people. Eventually God shows up, and the first thing that we have in there is God delivers, but then he has to kill all of these guys. So he killed 450. I don't. The Bible doesn't say clearly, so we can just assume it was himself who did it. I don't know. He's like, hold them all up because they will be running. Like the moment that he's killing one, it's like, I'm not staying to watch.
Around for that. Yeah.
Or maybe people are like, hey, let's just kill him. There's more of us. But the people actually reacted to the Almighty God who delivered and brought up the showdown that I am the only one who exists. So, but we have mentioned this over and over and over again, that we were not originally designed to die, not to kill. And so he's killing because of felt duty to God, that these people needed to die. And 450 deaths, it's quite traumatic.
Yeah, just think about that. I don't know how big the communities that the people that live in are, but I think about my church, and on a full day, that's 100 people. And so that would be 4 of my church families worth of people. When you think about it in terms that you can wrap your fingers around, it's a lot of people.
A river of blood, for sure. Not only psychologically, for whatever angle you see it, psychologically, emotionally, socially. People seeing this guy, the prophet of God, look at him. You don't need to be scared about this guy. He's killing everybody. Like a child looking at this. And back then there was no filters. The children stay at home because they cannot watch this. Everybody's there. Yeah. And then. And physically, just physically, even if I don't know how they kill, I don't want to make it graphic, but physically demanding. Yeah. And then it comes to the Jezebel thing. Okay, I finish. Tell the guy, and sending an Instagram post like, I'm gonna kill this guy, and he's like, oh no, run away.
Because do you think that he's done all this, and now that he's been threatened again, he's thinking about going back on the run? Because right up at this point, before Mount Carmel, he's been on the run for 3 years. He's been fed in the wilderness by ravens and in the widow's home. Do you think that maybe the 3 years of being on the run, now that he's got back to this point and being threatened, would have impacted him? That maybe that would have been potentially one of the triggers that triggered that?
For him to feel unwell, you mean? Or what?
Or now that he's being threatened again, that he feels like, oh, do I have to go on the run again?
Okay, yeah. Well, I think when you see the storyline and the context that we just mentioned about what happened at that Mounds, there was an emotion. He was burnt out. There was an emotional exhaustion that comes to play a role. I mean, at best, even the good, exciting things that happen in our lives that are events that mark us and bring a lot of chemicals in our brain that leaves us depleted, can cause us to be burnt out.
Mm-hmm.
I can think one of the things that I can think of, a very rapid thing, depending on what wedding people have at a wedding. It's like, preparing this and rushing for that. And by the end, you're like, finally, honeymoon. It's like, I'm very tired right now. It's like, it's a physical, emotionally demanding.
I feel like when we got married, I feel like I slept for the first 3 days, I think. Just trying to get back into
catching up.
Yeah, catching up.
And it's meant to be an emotionally exciting thing. Now, imagine this being distressful, traumatizing. It's to a different level. And on top of that, somebody's going to swearing, putting in the life stories, I'm going to kill this guy. Tell him. Hashtagging him right there, right? And so the paradox here is, I would think that, I don't know how the peak of his career, we know that this guy went to heaven, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the peak of his career on earth probably was there as a prophet, like the showdown.
The Mount Carmel experience, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And it was after that he became flat.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the things that we talk, exhaustion, burned out, emotionally demanding tasks.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we kind of start applying some of this stuff into our lives. How many times we do ministries and service and family relationships and events and work and things that we fill our lives with. And we come to the point that we have nothing much else to offer. And we try and we kind of stretch it, and the rubber band just keeps on stretching until the point that it's just bursting.
Yeah, well, burnout is actually a big problem in our church, isn't it? A lot of us will work until we're just completely burnt out, and rather than taking a break and actually looking after our mental health.
Yeah. And one of the beautiful thing about this case, and I think in the episode of Job, Luke, you alluded to or Ben, one of you, I mentioned the idea of I think it was the Job episode. You can still be okay with God and still go through these difficulties. And I think this is a good textbook example to debunk the myth of mental illnesses or mental deterioration, emotional deterioration, as being linked to your spiritual life. Because I don't really care if it's a pastor or an elder who listens or watches to this, or anybody who thinks like, if you are good with God, you cannot go through that. Because the person who says that to me, I will say like, are you Elijah? Are you the prophet? And if you aren't, well, let me tell you about this guy who not only was like this with God. He said, hey, God, please listen to me, and fire comes down to heaven. How many times have you literally physically commanded fire from heaven? None. And he went downhill. And you can say like, he didn't have faith. Like if my logic is right, he actually went through this because of his faith. He went through the duty that he had to do. So he wasn't separated from God. He was not the guy who is not going to church or not praying or memorizing Bible verses. He was the guy who was doing all that. He was the teacher and truly believing it and living it. And his mental health went downhill just like that. That's scary, because that means that it can happen to anyone.
Yeah, we're all vulnerable.
We're all vulnerable. And at the same time, that's hopeful because of what God did for him at that time. Right? So it doesn't make sense like, hey, you believe in God and you did all this, and now this queen is saying, I'm going to kill you, and he's all of a sudden fearful. He's a human.
And what you alluded to then about what God did for him, I always find this passage really interesting because it feels like it feels like too simple, right? It's not theological. It's not like, it's quite literally. It's in 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 7. This is after he runs, and an angel of the Lord came back the second time. A bit before that. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a broom tree, and he prayed that he might die and said, "It is enough. Now, Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my fathers." Then, as he lay and slept under the broom tree, suddenly an angel touched him and said to him, "Arise and eat." Then he looked, and there at his head was a cake baked on coals and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and laid down again. The angel of the Lord came back a second time, touched him, and said, "Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you." So he arose, ate and drank, and he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights as far as Horeb, the mountain of God. I just find it so interesting that, like, in the midst of all of this high spiritual language and story, you know, with what happened on Mount Carmel and all the rest of it, and he felt, you know, God, just let me die. Like, that's the place that he was at. And God's ministry to him was, have a nap, here's some food and water. You know, like, it was those basic needs. Like you were saying in an earlier episode, that one of the best ways we can support people is by looking at the symptoms, right? Like, where they're at right now, what do they actually need?
Yeah. And that's exactly what God did through this process. He gave him the time to, he could have said, okay, what are you doing? No, I'm here and leave me alone. Can I please die? He's like, okay, look, here's food, just go and eat. And then he went back to sleep. And God could have said, what are you doing? No, I have a duty for you to do right now. Go to the board meeting because there is other prophets that you need to talk to. Right? Like, no, okay, you need to sleep. Just do that. Just take the time, rest. And then and he repeats, as you mentioned, he repeats a few times. And Elijah, and this is an interesting thing. You know, we have talked about different people throughout this series. Saul suicided because of shame and guilt. Samson, it said that I don't think that he necessarily suicided, but maybe we were with that premise. He suicided in revenge. And this guy is thinking, I want to die. Job wanted to die because of grief and loss. And this one is another example.
Here, isn't it?
It's a theme. It's a theme. And I think that's important thing, because when we get to this level of mental stress, it's not hard to lose this desire to live. Because we're vulnerable, because the suffering is so much, or the exhaustion is so much, that we just think like, I just want to not go to sleep, because that's what death is. There is no return, right? But I just want to go to sleep and never wake up. Because if I wake up, this lady is going to come and try to get me. And like, I had enough. Right? So another interesting thing is that it says that he came from a day's journey. And it's an interesting thing, because he was exercising and yet he was still going through this flat depression. The endorphins were not kicking in. I mean, he went through hike. You know, he should be feeling great. But now, because, you know, sometimes it's not enough. He needed to rest. He needed to eat. The interesting thing about Elijah is that he still listened to the counsel, even though he didn't feel like it. When you are in this state of mind, a depressive, hopeless state of mind, I don't know if you ever went through that. You don't have to say that right here, right now. But think of somebody who you know. Appetite is not really great. That's the last thing I want to do. Like, I'm not hungry. But he said, but God, and then, you know, he God sends this thing and gives this message and delivers and tells him, you know, here there is bread, rise and eat. There is water, there is whatever, and he listens to it. And that is a key element for any of us who go through that, or anybody who listens or watches, that sometimes you might go through this experience and you don't feel like it, but if you do it and you are patient with the process, you'll get better eventually. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's a beautiful thing that Elijah gives us in these examples. One, you don't have to be far away from God to go through this. It's a myth. That's silly. That's dangerous even when you think about it. And two, be patient. You know, be acknowledging that this is a struggle, and we can do the same thing. I mean, we don't have to fulfill the role of God, but we can give that take that as an example of the people that we help. Hey, you know, it's difficult. You need to rest. Here, I'll bring you food. I'll nurture you. And eventually, with time, we might encourage you to do the next step. The next step. And that's what we do sometimes in therapy. You know, if I tell my patient when he comes depressed, like, you do that. There's new study. Have you heard of that? There's 8 things. It's like, it's so hard. No, you don't do that at the beginning. So, and maybe, you know, we talk about last episode? Yeah, in terms of Job. Maybe that's what the friends needed to do, you know, listen, and then a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And
don't overwhelm.
Yeah.
I just want to pick up on something you've been saying. So the time to eat and drink and rest that came after fulfilling his duty. So sometimes when we're fulfilling God's duty, we might get to this place where we're a bit burnt out or whatever. Maybe not necessarily that was God's desire, but that's sometimes what happens. And I think it's really important that what we're saying is, what we're noticing in the text is that God was okay with Elijah taking some time to repair.
100%.
Right? And
he let him.
Yeah, but that's something that I think sometimes we feel is maybe sometimes wrong. when we're thinking like, I have a duty to fulfill.
Yeah, taking time off is a failure.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, or lack of duty, lack of responsibility, or I'm not a good enough Christian.
Right, right.
Yeah, exactly.
Jesus died on the cross. I have to go ahead and do. 100%. I mean, we have examples of people who probably went the extra mile and stretched the rubber band, but the rubber bands might have been stronger and longer and bigger. Paul, shipwrecked, bashed up to death, stoned. Everything happened to the guy, and he kept on going.
Mm-hmm.
Different people, different temperament, different gifts, different abilities, different resilience is in different shapes and forms, and that's where awareness comes to play a role. Some of us might take more, some of us might take less, and God works with that and allows us to identify. You could even argue that God's against yourself and against what God wants you to do if you don't take that time off, right?
Yeah.
And you're doing the opposite, paradoxical to what you're trying to do. Like, no, I'm gonna continue to do to you, but in doing that, you are
in a way you're
burning.
Yeah, I was like, you're robbing the people that you would serve in the future of that service by not looking after yourself now.
Yeah, the quality will decrease significantly.
Because if in this story, if Elijah hadn't have taken that time to repair, what would have happened?
Well, I don't know. I will think that depression is such that if we don't take the time to be able to heal, it's not gonna. It's a medical condition, right? So it doesn't just happen like have a headache and then it goes away. Especially and headaches do go away unless you have, like, for example, an embolism and then you get a stroke. Then you're gonna have a headache for a long time, right? So headache, it's the
understatement.
Yeah. So it's not gonna go away. So we need to take the time. Actually, that's a bit of a lie. I learned this from one of my mentors, a psychiatrist in a faraway place here in Australia, a different scene. He mentioned, and it's in the textbooks, that with the ideal condition, depression can actually be healed, but that's the ideal conditions. Now, who in the world is having the perfect relationship, the perfect children, the perfect wife, the perfect girlfriend, whatever, perfect job, perfect everything? Nobody. Henceforth, it doesn't heal. But the idea is that in 2 years, without you doing absolutely zero, you're gonna be okay. If you let it just time goes by.
But
nobody has that condition.
Who has that life? Yeah.
Nobody. So it's really, and the question is, how do we come to that conclusion? Maybe it's hopeful thinking, but it's still in the books of psychiatry. Yeah. So the idea here is that it will get worse before it gets better. You just keep on stretching to the point of, I mean, he's already thinking, kill me now. From there, God, now just do it. Why do you let me? From there to, okay, well, you don't want to do it? Well, guess what? I can do it myself.
Right.
Hopefully not. Yeah. Hopefully not. But that's the worst.
That's the next step.
That's
right?
Maybe there's a few steps before.
What I mean is, like, that's where that road ends.
Well, he could. He could for sure.
And maybe if we take it on a spiritual level, if this was happening, say, in our lives, where we had burned out due to spiritual duty, like we're trying to fulfill spiritual duty, and we didn't take time to repair, I think maybe one of the outcomes that we could maybe anticipate would be that we might actually end up walking away from God, because it all got too much, and then we start going through that blame process you were talking about 100%. When we were talking about Job, where we start to blame God, and it's like, it's your fault. Why did you call me to do this work when obviously I can't handle it? And then instead of taking time to repair and then coming back fresh, we just leave altogether.
Yes, 100%. Anecdotally, well, of course, because this is not science, this is the observations. I have seen that happening. I've seen that happening at different levels with different individuals, close and far away from me. But it hurts a lot when it's the closest. But it happens when you just throw the towel and walk away.
Right.
So
So this idea of repair is really, really important.
Yeah. Restoration of your emotional, physical, and emotional well-being. They're linked. We cannot delink. The psychosocial, biopsychosocial, spiritual model, which we didn't talk about, but all of them link to each other. There's four corners. So it is extremely important. And then, I mean, when you look at the model of healing for him, we do literally have the textbook idea of the nutrition, exercise, water, sunshine, temperance, air, rest, and trust in divine power in this story.
Yeah,
every single one.
Every part of that is in there. Right?
God fed him with bread. Ideally, we would like to think that it was a 12 grain, 15 grain bread. Gluten free for those who don't like it. Listen to the Gluten Down podcast. It's great.
So should have seen that one covered.
I didn't think of it. It just came. Gluten Time podcast.
Give us that a third time as well.
Gluten Time podcast.
There we go.
Are you going to cut it off? You can if you want. Anyhow, the bread is there. The exercise, God was going to give it to him later because he says, go on a journey. He's going to go through. He was in the mountains. We know that. There is water there. There is fresh air. The temperance is, he's resting and God is not going to overfeed him. All of this is happening right there with him. And obviously, he's still connecting with God despite of the fact that he's saying, just kill me now. He's still keeping this prayerful relationship with God. Yes. Yeah. Yes, he's not saying, do you exist, do you not, are you there, are you not? He's like, I know you're there, listen to me. Why is this happening? I want to die. So all of them were there, and they were successful. Eventually he got up, and he went and did his duty, but God waited for him, and he didn't throw the towel. I mean, he waited. So for those people some of us who might be in that position, once we get restored, we can continue with the ministry, with the job, with the with whatever we have. Yeah. Once we get healed, we can go back to those even relationships. So that's definitely something that was there for sure.
So I wanted to touch on verse 10. I'm not sure whether of chapter 19. I'm not sure whether we've sort of spoken around it, but not necessarily addressed it specifically. It says, so he said, I have been very zealous for the Lord God of hosts, for the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they seek to take my life. There's this idea of loneliness that's, I guess, prevalent in the story of Elijah. How do we repair that element?
Okay, that's again when we talk behind the scenes, I say textbook depression, a lot of trauma from whatever we talked about, but that's where the cognitive therapy comes. Cognitive behavioral therapy is all about that activation. That's the whole New Start thing. The trust in divine power. It's part of that cognitive aspect, but that was the problem with Elijah, that he self-pity. I have a sermon that I preach on the self-pity of Elijah, and it's I actually have presented that in different forums and not just church environments. And the self-pity of this guy who thinks that I'm the only one who is going through this. And you know how we mentioned in the episode of Job, if you haven't listened or watched to that, go and do that, because we talked about that. But Job had the excuse to say, like, I'm the only guy with this problem. But Elijah, I don't know. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I think he didn't, but he didn't know.
Yeah, I was going to say, because God corrects him later, right? God corrects him.
That's his therapy.
Yeah, that's right. Because God telling him the truth then. He's like, well, actually, you're not the only one. I still have, 4,000 that haven't bent the knee to Baal.
Haven't been. Yeah. So that's the therapy. That's the key, to try and find evidence to the fact that God is still there. In this case, spiritually speaking, the faith that we have brings us hope. Find the evidence that challenges our self-pity, our distorted thoughts, our belief system that is ingrained to the fact that I'm the only one and I'm going to die. Yeah,
dispute that.
Which is, there is so many, and this is what depression does. There is a cognitive dissonance. There is distorted thinking, distorted cognition, because on the one side, it's like, why am I here alive? Kill me now. And it's like he's running away from somebody killing him. Maybe he's worried that he's going to be tortured before being killed. But if he wanted to die, just go to Jezebel. Yeah. You go to Jezebel, she'll do the job for you. Yeah. But he didn't want to die. No. And most people, this is a bracketing here, but most people who opt for the option of taking their own lives, nobody wants to die. Because we're not designed for that. It's like, at that time seems to be Dr. David DeLeo. That's his last name, DeLeo. Probably one of the most prominent suicidologists in the world. He used to be in Brisbane, and he's now in the World Health Organization as an advisor for this aspect. He mentions about this idea of the definition of suicide, meaning or including the aspect of there is choices. But at that time, this choice seems to be the most appropriate and relevant as compared to the other choices. But he's still struggling with this because even though it's a choice, it's an option rather. There is options. We're not designed for that. And we know he didn't want to die. Because he's running away from being killed.
He just wanted an out from his current situation.
Yeah. But that tells us a little bit about the mindset as well. Which is cognitive distortions or distorted way of thinking happen when we are going through this emotional turmoil, depression, trauma, when we don't see things clearly anymore. And this is what's happening to him. He's not seeing clear anymore. So God has to come and tell him.
So would you say when we are going through such situations and we aren't seeing clearly, if we have insight, right? If we have the capacity to recognize that, hey, I'm going through something that's really significant, that's traumatic or whatever it is, and this is certainly not my normal operating circumstances, would it be wise for us to like hold off on any like significant decision making until after things have calmed down?
That wouldn't be an unreasonable thing to think.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That wouldn't be unreasonable to not make decisions when we're in such a state of mind. And yeah, going back to this aspect, when we analyze what's going on, in any distorted thought, there is always what we call a core belief system. So sometimes we carry this from a long time, or sometimes we develop in them as we go when, for example, we have a traumatic experience like he did, and his life is at stake. So the question here is, as we analyze our own thinking to be able to get out of it, not only to find evidence, but rather first we need to dissect. What is my core belief system here? What am I actually thinking about myself, about the situation, about, in this case, about God? And his beliefs thinking could have been, it's self-pity, but he's driven by, I'm alone, God left me. But God is there. But I'm going through this override of difficulty that I'm like, well, you're there, but he cannot see that if God is feeding him, talking to him, wouldn't he look after him? He can't. So God had to intervene. And that's when sometimes, being able to sit back, think and reflect, what am I really thinking about myself? That I'm not good enough, that I am not worth it, that I'm alone, I'm the only one, that nobody has gone through this experience, or I know that people have gone through such experience, but not the way I have, which is true in some ways. But that rumination brings us down to the point that it's hard to get out of it. So God comes, and that's the best intervention he could do. Is like, have you heard of these people? Go and talk to them. I'm going to have another duty for you. And then he's like, oh, okay, fine, I'll go and see. And sometimes, I don't know if Elijah believed it or not. I think he believed. I mean, he listened to God, so he must have an element to believe. Okay, fine. If you're saying that exists, that there are people around who haven't kneeled down to Baal, then I believe it. And sometimes we have to believe by faith because he hasn't seen it. And that's where faith can play a role. What are those things that this thing tells us that God does for us? Not because we are not having a relationship with God, but rather because even in a relationship with God, Elijah was like this, remember? We struggle with exhaustion and emotional turmoil because life can be hard. And we had to acknowledge that.
I find it so fascinating that the next thing we hear is he's partnering up with Elisha and mentoring somebody. Like he's going through this like just chronic dip in his life, and then like as soon as he gets out of it, God's like, all right, your next task is to prepare the way for the future.
For the next, well, and I think that could bring us hope. Because even Elijah being in the dumps, he came back up with the right time treatment process, and he became a mentor, a leader, back on track to the duty that God gave him. So again, if you put a post to your ministry, to your job, to your relationship at the time to try and make sure that you're okay, doesn't have to be the end. You can be prepared for greater things. It's like a broken bone. Anybody have broken a bone?
Yep.
Okay, so you break a bone, and physically speaking, at that section where the bone heals, actually heals stronger. Some people re-break it or there might be an issue there, but you have. But that bone is meant to actually, there is a scarring and whatever you want, and pains and whatever, but it's meant to be stronger. And that's what happens sometimes. You can have a fallout with somebody or in a situation or a mental state, and you can actually come stronger because you can learn from that. The bond can be better, the relationship can be better, your ministry can be better, your job can be better.
That in itself is a very, very encouraging thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really, the fact that, because a lot of
I hope
people,
so.
Yeah. Well, what I'm meaning is like I often, like when I think about times in my life where I've been in a bad place, or I guess we all reflect on our lives and think, what if I'd made that decision or this decision and that. And one of the things that I often have thought about or with concern is I've thought to myself, like, I wonder, like, once you've gone through this, does that mean that you're better or you're more broken? Like, on the other side of it. And so hearing that is, it's good for people to recognize that just because you've gone through these trials and challenges, it actually could potentially mean that you come out the other side stronger than what you went into it, not more damaged.
Yeah, you can. Take the process, take the time, take the counsel, do the things that God might have been showing you, or God might have sent somebody to tell you, hey, maybe try a little bit of this. Try and help yourself a tiny little bit by small measures, and eventually, you can come to that point when it's going to be better.
And if Elisha is the legacy of Elijah, then what you're saying is absolutely true, right? Because he was an even more powerful prophet.
Correct.
Than Elijah was.
Correct.
So the healing was even better.
It helped him to grow, and we have limited information as to how the full extent of the conversations of the mentoring, but I don't know. I would like to think that he will talk, hey, one day I was in the dumps and they were persecuting me and I went through this process. God was there, but I thought he wasn't, and then whatever, and I came out well. Yeah. And he learned from that. Yeah. That is Elijah. I definitely it helped both. Yeah. And needless to say, he had a pretty good deal at the end.
Yeah. Yes, he did.
Translation is that would be
being
pretty
taken
hot.
to heaven.
Yeah.
In such a pretty cool manner.
Be amazing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And.
So, as far I feel like we've kind of organically gone through the process, but is there anything else treatment-wise or any flat spots that in the story that you feel are important that we need to still talk about?
When you stop the cameras, they will come. Like before.
It's always the way.
Right now, I think we have covered enough to think about the life of this individual as somebody who struggled and who came okay. And who God wasn't ashamed to say that even though he was close to him, he was his body and his prophet, he went through this struggle. He was the Christian. He wasn't just a Christian. He was a Christian, the one to follow. So
Well, we're going to leave that there. Thank you for joining us for this series. If you've enjoyed it and you'd like to see us do more Bible characters, please let us know in the comments. Send us a message on Instagram or Facebook, wherever you find us. We'd love to hear your suggestions on Bible characters that you'd like to hear us chat about. So, Dan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It was awesome.
Thank you.
It's been lots of fun.
Hope you can come back.
Fun.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. No worries. Well, you guys, if you've enjoyed it, share it with a friend, and we look forward to catching you guys for another episode next week.
Bye.